Hi, everyone, and welcome to our RealGreen Wavelytics webinar today. My name is Danielle McCarthy, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Wavelytics, and we're really happy to have you here today. Presenting with me will be our fantastic Senior Product Manager and Wavelytics expert, Alan. Some of you may know. Just a quick look at the agenda for today. Start with some housekeeping notes. And then we'll jump into the details of our latest product release, Decision Intelligence, including a live demo. And then we'll spend time at the end answering questions, as many as we can live. For the housekeeping section, at the end, we're going to share a QR code. And if you want to learn more about Wavelytics Decision Intelligence and hear from your sales rep, please scan that at the end. And also during the webinar, please make sure you're using the Zoom Q&A function. Again, we'll save time to answer live with Alan any questions that you have. We are recording this session and it will live in RealGreen communities. And you can take a look at it whenever you get a chance. And we will email you a copy of this presentation in a handful of days. And lastly, if you'd like to connect at the end, do a co-branded testimonial or tell us your RealGreen Wavelytics story, please reach out to me. I'll leave my contact info on the last slide. And now I will pass it over to Alan to get to the fun stuff.
Cool. Thank you, Danielle. So excited to be here with all of you today and share where we are with Wavelytics as we get ready to go to market with Decision Intelligence. Um, some of you may have seen some of these webinars in the past, or may have met with us in the past, or maybe current customers looking for updates. So looking forward to going through this with you all. So when we talk about decision intelligence, what we're focused on here really is trying to give you efficient, clean access to your data so that you can make good decisions as quickly as possible. So we don't want you to have to hunt through reports or do a lot of manual data cleaning or organization in order to get the information that you need. We know that RealGreen has a lot of reports that are great and provide a lot of valuable insights. But we just want to try to reduce the time to those insights, get you to the place where you can make decisions faster and where you get information at the time that you need it, while it's still actionable. And it's not necessarily dependent on you to go and find it, but we're bringing those insights to you so that you have them right at the moment when you can make the decision. So when we talk about decision intelligence, and we will look at this together inside the product today. But when we talk about decision intelligence, we have several different ways that we convey information. The kind of the core aspect of decision intelligence are our intelligence hubs, and the hubs are organized by domain of your business, right? So we think about these currently in four critical areas: ops, sales, customers, and finance. Um, when we go live here in the next couple of weeks, we will be going live with the operations hub. So that will be the first one, and then we will iterate through these other hubs as we go through the rest of the year and into the first quarter of 27. Uh, the other piece of the tooling that we offer, in addition to the hubs, are the leaderboards and the scorecards. So these are sort of the notion of introducing some gamification, some friendly competition to kind of show, whether it's techs in the field or whether it's branches or whether it's salespeople, giving kind of that leaderboard view to see how the performance is stacking up, and then the ability to drill in from a leaderboard into a scorecard for that individual unit of your business, whether it's an individual or a business unit, a branch, whatever it might be, to be able to see how they are performing compared to their peers. And we will look at exactly what that looks like in a little bit. And then within the hubs, the other thing that we do in addition to surfacing the metrics is we try to highlight things that we think need issue or need attention in the short term, right? So this is what we call the problems tab, where we might surface things that we think are immediately actionable, kind of a punch list to go take care of. So these are the kind of the four ways and that we deliver the intelligence and that we deliver information to enable you to hopefully make good decisions and drive your business forward. So from here, we will bounce over inside the platform. We have a few slides here, but I'm just going to actually show you rather than talk to this in slides. So let me switch over, and I am going to for today. I'm going to bounce back and forth between the actual product itself and the prototype, just because we are still working through some things in the product. Our release date officially is the 24th, so that's 2 weeks from today. So you will see that the majority of the work is done here, but we have a couple things that we are cleaning up as we get ready to go to launch. And I think the other thing that this will show you is that the end result of what we're going to be releasing looks um, very similar to what we prototyped. So if you've been seeing the prototypes and you've been kind of following along with the development, this should give you some good confidence that the thing that is actually making it into the product is going to look pretty much exactly like what we've been showing for the last few months. So to start, we're in the product right now. This is a demo environment. So the data is going to be a little spotty here. It's not going to make a lot of sense from a narrative perspective, right? But it'll give you an idea on what this would look like if it was implemented for you. So where this is going to live is in that current report and analytics area. You can go in and now access decision intelligence. And when you do that, you will land here on the operations hub. At the top of the operations hub, you're going to see a summary of the things that we think are most relevant to know. Obviously, the ones that are up here right now don't really make much sense because the data is kind of junky data. But in your environment where you have real actual operational data, you would see a few highlights, things that we think are relevant to know in the short term, things that we think are relevant to know, a little bit wider window, just kind of a snapshot of where you sit currently. The other thing that we have implemented here that I think is going to be useful for everyone is we have looked historically to see what sorts of variances and changes in metrics are actually meaningful. And so we will be able to give you context. Not only has, a certain metric changed by 6% or 8% or 14% or whatever it might be, but we'll be able to tell you how meaningful that is historically, whether that is a change worth knowing about, but maybe not something that you need to immediately take action on, or whether that's something that really represents kind of an outlier and something that you might want to try to understand further. So, and the other thing we'll do is if there's nothing that we think is worth surfacing for any given time period on a given day when you log in, if everything looks pretty stable compared to where it's been over let's say the past 30 days, and also looks pretty stable to the same period last year, then we'll tell you that, right? We'll tell you that, hey, everything looks pretty much within the variance that we would expect, and so that saves you the time of having to look at a metric that says, oh, this changed, but doesn't mean anything. Is that useful to know? We will be making those decisions via the AI tooling and the automation, and our knowledge of the historical data to just help filter out anything that is not useful for you to know. So that's how the things to know today and things to know this week will work. When you come down into the snapshot area, so here's the tab, the navigation through the hub. These are all the different areas of the hub. It's going to start with high-level KPIs for you to understand on the snapshot screen. So we're looking at production KPIs, how many services are getting done, how many dollars are being generated off of those services, how much square footage is being covered by those services, and then productivity metrics, sort of per technician, right? So how many services are getting completed per tech day, how much production, how much square footage, and then coming down into how often are stops resulting in no services, as well as how long is it taking to resolve ASAP requests, and then coming down to just looking at your production per service, how much square footage you're covering per service, and how much production per 1,000 square feet. So just really this is meant to just kind of like overall kind of health, just quick at a glance view of where the business sits. And then we give you a look into what are the reason codes that are resulting in no service also on the snapshot screen. Um, so that's the snapshot, just quick kind of at a glance understanding of the business. As you go through these tabs, and before I go any further, obviously you have full control over date ranges here, right? So you can show previous or current week, month, quarter, year, and you can also do a custom date range if you want to do that. Um, and then filters, all the filters that you would expect to have here, filter by residential versus commercial, um, filter only for programs, and then or only enabled programs, only active employees, all that kind of stuff. And then if obviously you want to filter by program type, market, branch, region, sort of your business hierarchy, you can do that as well. So if we these filters will persist as you go through the tabs where relevant, right? They're not relevant to every tab, but in the tabs where they're relevant, those filters will persist as you go through. So if we flip over to the pacing tab, if you've seen what we've shown in the past, this is actually a new one. This is something that we decided since the last time we did a webinar, or shared content, or at conference or anything like that. So what we're showing here is the top bar shows uh, production progress compared to the previous year. So you can see, and obviously there's no data here, so it's not super interesting to look at in this view, but this would be sort of where you were on the same day last year, and then this would be where you were at the end of the month last year. So you can sort of see how you're tracking, like, oh, I'm a little bit behind last year's pace or a little bit ahead of last year's pace. And then you can see as you get towards the end of the month, are you looking like you're going to hit where you were at the end of the same month last year, if you're going to hit ahead of that. So that's that view. And then the other thing we've introduced is round pacing. And it's by program, right? So you pick whichever program you would like to pick, and then we'll show you how you're doing on your rounds. So what percentage of your rounds are completed, or what percentage of your services for a given round are completed, and how many were skipped, and then how many are pending, which means either they haven't been done, which means either they're scheduled or they haven't been done, right? So giving you kind of a stacked view so you can see as you go through the year, and as you close out each round, just making sure that you're completing, hopefully the vast majority of those services that needed to be completed in each round. So that's the pacing tab. And then as we sort of continue to roll through, um, we give you different ways to interact with the KPIs that are available within the hub. So you can see all of the KPIs, right? So all of the KPIs that exist on the snapshot page, these are the KPIs that will flow with you as you go through into the different tabs. So if we go to the trends tab, it's all the same KPIs, right? And then you can just trend those out over any given time period that you would like to select, right? So if you wanted to see kind of a recent view, you could do, previous week or current month. Current month would be month to date. Or you could look historically this year, last year. You can also do a custom date range, and you can just sort of see how those things are trending over time. And you can also see current year compared to last year, right? So this is the darker color is current year, the lighter year is last year. So this is Let's see if we have data for this year in the demo database. We do not. Okay, so you could see like last year compared to the year before that, right? How it was how it was tracking, just in this example, right? But in your environment, obviously, you would be able to log in and see, hey, for month to date, what is my trend? Or year to date, what is my trend? And how does that compare to previous year so that you can see sort of growth of the business over time. And then again, you can do that for any of the metrics that are available here.
Hey, Alan,
The, Mhm.
quick question.
Yeah.
For a question came in of does this also show service and our customers on holds? So I don't know if that's one of the KPIs.
It doesn't show customers on hold. That might be something that we would think about kind of when we get to our customer tab. And I'm not sure if that question was maybe related to pacing and maybe making sure that if a customer is on hold, that maybe we're not including them in the round pacing numbers? And the answer to that would be yes. If they're not, if that's not a service that we intend to complete, then we are definitely excluding that. But in terms of just showing how many customers you have on hold, we don't have that currently. If we feel like that's an operational metric where you would want to see that within the Ops Hub, then that's definitely something we can consider. And feel free to shoot me a message. My contact information will be at the end, and would be happy to discuss that a little more. Um, Okay, so as we roll through into the next sort of thing we can do with the data, in addition to being able to trend it out over time, we give you some flexibility to be able to stack rank by the different areas within your business and see how different parts of the business are performing, right? So we really try to give you control here so that you can see this however you would like to see it. So you can show me the top or the bottom, and you can change the number. So let me see. We'll be positive to start. Let me show my top 10 technicians by completed services per tech day, right? So we can see sort of who the top performers are. If you wanted to take a different approach, you could flip that, right, and you could look at the sort of the bottom. And then you can again do that. You can group it by multiple areas. So you could do it by technicians, you could do it by branches, you could do it by programs. If you wanted to see, show me my top 10 producing programs. You could look at that also. So kind of whichever area of the business you want to explore in terms of a kind of a ranking or a comparison, you can see that. And then you have control over which KPIs. And again, it's the same KPIs that we carry through the whole hub with, again, the filters. If we had applied different filters on the snapshot, they would flow through to here so that you could see that. So um, starting with the snapshot, big kind of overview of all the KPIs at a glance, and then you want to see a trend for one of those KPIs, you can trend it out. You want to see a specific comparison of one of those KPIs, then you can view that as well and see what that looks like. Um, Next tab is the problems tab. So this is going to be blank for now, but but you can sort of envision what this would be if we had data here. So the main one that we are going to have on the problems tab is going to be uh, ASAP service requests that have not been completed, and allowing you to kind of see date ranges on those. So show me ones that were generated in the last 5 days, or show me ones that were generated, 15 to 30 days ago, over 30 days ago. I mean, hopefully we don't have any ASAP requests that are over 30 days old, right? Because that we may have a problem at that point. But the idea here would be to just quickly be able to see, just like you can see on the snapshot tab, how long is it on average taking us to resolve an ASAP request. You can see here, do we have any that have been sitting for a few days or a week or more? And in some cases, this could point you to just stuff that you need to go into RealGreen and clean up the data a little bit, right? If you have one that was 20 days old, but it was actually completed and it just didn't get marked, or it's something that didn't need to get done for whatever reason, might point you to some stuff that you need to clean up a little bit. But the goal would be once you have, everything reflected accurately inside the software, that this is really surfacing things that potentially need attention for you. Um, and then the other thing that we are going to do is, and this probably won't be for the initial release. This will probably be something that comes as a fast follow at the beginning of Q3, is we're also going to surface customers who have had a long gap between services, right? So you can imagine a scenario where somebody gets serviced at the very beginning of a round, but then maybe they get scheduled for the middle or the end of the next round. And obviously, we could end up with a big gap there where that wouldn't be a great experience for that customer. You may end up having to come out and do, they may request you to come out to do a treatment in between because it's too long. So we want to highlight anything where kind of like just the way customers fall within the rounds gets kind of out of sequence, and make sure that there's nobody who ends up, even though it looks like we're getting everybody done within the round. If somebody gets done at the very beginning of one and the very end of the next, obviously that's not ideal. So just helping you identify those cases so you can shift around the scheduling for those customers and get them into a cadence that will produce better results for them. So that is kind of how we flow through the operations hub. And then the other thing that we always do is expose the data, right? So all of the records that go into producing these KPIs on all the different screens you have available to you. So this would allow you, if you really wanted to kind of maybe deep dive into something, like if you were looking at a condensed time frame and you were looking at like production numbers for yesterday or for the current week or something, and they looked a little bit off, and it was one specific program that maybe had the concern, you could actually come in here and pull, like, show me for one program for one day, show me all the records, and then you could actually come in like line by line and see, what was happening, and see if, kind of try to figure out where the gap was, or where, your results don't match sort of what you would expect, and that might be maybe the data surfaces something that you weren't aware of, or maybe it highlights something inside RealGreen that you need to go and look at and make sure is correct. Um, so that is how that's the data availability. The other thing you can do here is you can export it. So if you wanted to export this data out of the system, and be able to go work with it, let's say in Excel, to sort of do your own kind of custom analysis, you can do that from here. Our goal is to make it so that's not necessary. Our goal is to show you the relevant information and everything that you need here inside of Decision Intelligence. But if you wanted to do something custom, or really dig in or get really specific on something, then you could always bring the data out of the system. Worth noting that the ability to export data is an elevated permission for users who have Wavelytics access. So you do have the ability to control that. So you can give a user read-only access. Obviously, we know it can be sensitive. You may not want every user to be able to take data out of the system like that in giant batches. So we do control that functionality so that you can say, hey, give somebody view-only access, or also give them the ability to export and work with the data. So that is the operations hub.
Hey, Alan,
Hmm.
quick question. Might be too specific, so we could take it offline if it
It's okay.
is. But one customer said they have programs that are set up by grass type service code, like different
Okay.
service codes. And so if a customer has multiple grass types, we have the price per production on the primary grass type, and the second is set at a $0 value. So this often convolutes the number of stops, since the address can show two service completions and then reduce their average revenue per stop. It can also increase the number of cancels. So the way they're currently handling this is running a pivot table to exclude the $0 programs. Is that something we'd be able to do here? Exclude the $0 service codes, or food for thought for
If
a deeper
so,
question?
yeah, if we don't have a filter that says exclude any services or any invoices or whatever that have $0 associated with them. We don't have that. If if certain service codes always are $0, then you could definitely come in and exclude those within the filters, or maybe we only have programs. I would have to double check on that, but that if the issue is if service codes would allow you to achieve that, then that is something. I don't know that we have it in place currently, but it would be a pretty straightforward thing for us to do to enable. So another use case that I maybe would like to hear a little more about. But if it's purely a dollar value thing, that might be a little bit of a challenge. But if it's a service code thing, that I think that's totally feasible for us to do.
Okay. And then another similar question. Can you filter
Mhm.
by flag code?
I will have to apologize. I actually don't know what flag code is. So I don't think so. These are the filters that we have in place right now. Um, yeah, and I'm actually I apologize. I'm not as much of a real green expert as some of the folks like who work on the product all the time because I work across all of the WorkWave products for Wavelytics. But that's something I could go to try and get an answer on after the webinar today.
Great. And then one more question came in
Mhm.
of how frequently is the data refreshed in Decision Intelligence Hub? Is it whenever the page is refreshed or updated, or what kind of
Yeah.
interval?
That would be so the data is refreshed every 4 hours, so it's 6 times a day. And that's where we are right now. Just kind of a one size fits all approach. We may in the future look at changing that, where maybe there's some metrics that update more frequently during the day. Maybe there's some things we only need to update once a day. So we may kind of take a more targeted approach in the future. But for right now, it's 6 times a day, every 4 hours. Okay. So we have that's kind of the hub. And in the future, we will build out more hubs, right? We talked about that, sort of the iterative development and the roadmap, and we'll get into that a little more. But what that looks like as we go into the future is more hubs across the top here. So, you know, customers hub, sales hub, finance hub, building that out, and that work will happen rapidly. We're not talking about years of work here. We're talking about every quarter significant new content being released. So let's jump in real quick to the leaderboard and scorecard. The scorecard is less built out currently, so I'm going to show it in its current state. I don't feel like we need to. We can be transparent about where we are in our development process. So, but I will also show the prototype just so you can get a better idea of what's going on there. But the leaderboard, we've only got two technicians in here. But the idea here is you would stack ranks your techs by critical metrics, and then this really serves as a navigation path where then you can go into the individual tech and see a scorecard, right? And so you're going to see some missing data here, and I will flip over, but just to give you an idea of the pattern. You can see strengths for this technician. You can see opportunities for this technician, sort of indicating opportunities for growth. And then you have the ability to set the comparisons, right? Do you want to compare this tech against other techs at the same branch within the same region at the overall account level? Do you want to put some exclusions in place to only include technicians who have a minimum number of services, at least 5 services within the time frame, or 10 or 50 or 100? And then down at the bottom, the ability to kind of like you can in the hub, show a comparison and a trend. But what that looks like in in the prototype, whoops, that's not the right one, um, is this, right? So strengths, opportunities, just like we talked about. The metrics here, we're going to show production metrics. Like dollar production and then services completed. We'll show efficiency in terms of completed services per day, square footage per hour, and then some quality metrics in terms of how often are stops resulting in no service. And then this actually is going to be a tech comment metric. This is going to change. So this will be a metric that shows how frequently are they making sure that they're leaving comments after the service is completed, and then making sure that those comments are customized to that particular service visit and not just a copy and paste of a template. So that is what we'll show there, and then you can see down here, right? This is what the comparison will look like. Again, you can choose the KPI, and the tech for the card will be highlighted, and then you can also trend it out and see how their performance is changing, and also relative to these thresholds of bronze, silver, and gold. And you see those here as well, where you can see how do they rank compared to other techs within whatever group you've selected here. And the gold is the top 25%, bronze is the bottom 25%, and silver is the middle 50%. So that is the approach there. Um, Open to feedback on that. That's something we could potentially change in the future, but just as an easy way to get started, uh, that's where we are current state. So um, that is the leaderboard and scorecard portion. And again, as we continue to build out more hubs, you will see more leaderboards, right? So when there's a sales hub, there will be a salesperson leaderboard. When there's a customer hub, we may do a customer leaderboard for fun, right? Like show you your longest tenured customers or your customers with the kind of highest value on the services they get, all that kind of stuff, right? And then be able to drill into an actual customer core scorecard and see sort of the health of that customer overall. So, but when we go live on the 24th, this is what we'll be going live with: the operations hub, the leaderboard, and the scorecard in fully completed states, obviously. And then what that looks like for the future, we can hop back over to the deck, and I'll do a few more slides here before we open it up for questions. You can see the rest of these, several of these slides are just going to show you what we just went through. So I'm just going to skip through these quickly. Oh, the other piece we should look at. So we should look at wave analysis, which is coming in Q3 as well. So this is not for the release that's coming in 2 weeks, but something that we will work on next quarter and will probably become available. It will become available at least to some customers in Q3 for initial kind of testing and all that, and kind of co-development and building together at the very least, and then probably later in the quarter should start to open up for more availability. So this is going to be really the ability to interact conversationally with uh, your data. And so what that looks like, I'm going to hop back over to the prototype here because this is not something that we have in production. This is something that we just have prototyped out. So the way this will work is within each hub, you'll have this little button up here where you'll be able to ask questions. And obviously I have preset questions here, but in a fully fledged version, you would be able to type in, your prompt. Everybody's using these tools now, so you sort of know what this experience is going to be. You would be able to ask questions about your data. The one thing to note here is we are going to be pretty focused and controlled when we release this. It's going to be related to the data that is available within the hub, right? So when the first release comes, it will probably be tied to the operations hub. And so if you ask a sales question, right, you probably won't be able to get an answer there. But if you ask operations related questions, you'll be able to get answers. And it will give you information beyond sort of just, you know, what is the number, right? Because you can get the number from the hub, right? So you don't need an AI tool to do that. But what the AI tool can do is kind of maybe stitch together multiple metrics into a story, help you understand the business a little bit better, help you understand what's driving some of the metrics that you see, be able to drill down, get a little bit more granular, um, without having to go click through and actually drill in the hub. You can actually just go ask those questions via the AI and get to a cleaner answer and maybe even some recommendations, right, based on industry standards and all of the knowledge that these models have accumulated. So, just as an example, all of these things actually are questions that you could just answer by looking at the hub, so they're not the best examples. But just as a sample, um, you can ask a question, produce a text answer, give you a little bit of a visual, show you kind of the logic that it's using to calculate that. Not that that's relevant for everybody, but for folks who maybe also have the data factory or are just interested in the back end, just being transparent about the query that we're running to kind of come to that answer. And then just allow you to conversationally kind of go from there and drill through until you sort of understand what you're trying to think through. So that will be coming in the future, and we're excited about that. The team is working on it currently, starting to see some results there. So Q3 we should definitely see that become more widely available. As we keep going here, so impact. Um, if you were at customer conference, you would have seen one of our pest customers give a presentation on how leaderboards for technicians have impacted their business. They were able to significantly increase the amount of services they were completing in a given day. Um, if you think of this in the context of a build buy decision, right? To build what we're building, I think is frankly not feasible for most customers, except for our very largest ones. And even then, huge savings to go with us compared to what it would cost to not just build, right? Because it's not a one-time build; it's also about maintenance and all of that. And the other critical piece here is when you think about that build buy decision is the security. The fact that this lives directly inside of RealGreen, your users don't have to go somewhere else to get the data that they need, and it already natively utilizes all of the security that exists in RealGreen. So what that means is RealGreen is secured by branch, right? So when a user logs in, they only see the data for the branches that they have access to, right? And there's really two level of controls here from a security perspective. So, we were looking at the operations hub. You can imagine a future state where there's an operations hub and a sales hub and a finance hub. Maybe you want to give somebody access only to operations and sales, but they don't have that finance hub, right? So you'll be able to control that, say which hubs you want to give users access to, and then the data they see within those hubs will be determined by which branches they have access to. So in that example where, let's say I have a regional manager and I want them to see the operations and the sales, but not the finance, and in their region they have 10 branches. If they log into the operations hub, they're going to see the operations data, but only for the 10 branches and none of the other branches within the organization. So that's how the security is handled there. And yeah, additional, just kind of speed to insight here, find things quickly, save time on, having to generate manual reports and try to dig through them to get your answers. So when we talk about things that are coming in the future here, for Real Green, we will, I think we've got things a little out of sequence here, but that's okay. The operations hub is coming here soon in the next 2 weeks. Wave analysis is the next big thing that's coming, and then the next hub that we will do for Real Green is going to be the sales hub that we are planning to knock out kind of concurrently with wave analysis in Q3, and then the other pieces will come later in the year. Customer Hub, we're really excited about the solve, highlighting retention risk and renewal trends and just kind of giving you insight on sort of where your customers stand, who's maybe at risk of moving on, and potentially some actions you can take to solve that. So that's coming later this year. But the next piece is so operations coming in 2 weeks, wave analysis and sales hub coming in Q3 is the current plan for the roadmap. Um, and then yeah, I will turn it back over to Danielle at this stage to wrap up, and then if there's any more questions, we'll jump into those.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. If you're already on RealGreen and you're interested in decision intelligence, contact your rep. And then if you're evaluating us, if you go to the next slide, Alan, there's a QR code. You can scan that, and we can have a rep contact you. There was a couple of questions that came in.
Mhm.
If you can answer those, Alan, can you talk to how this compares to applause? If they're using applause, they're currently using applause for reviews and scorecards.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're able to answer that.
Yeah. So the applause scorecard, just to be fully transparent, has significantly more data than we have at this stage. So the applause scorecard has pulls the metrics from RealGreen, right? And then factors in some of those MPS scores, and pulls, I think, some of the GPS and data and those sorts of things. So it's going to be we will have sort of a subset of the data that's available in Applause. We are working with Applause, looking at possibly getting the MPS data flowing back into RealGreen, so that we could display some of that as well. And then we also will be pulling the telematics data in Q3 so that we can do some of the reporting on uh, some of the GPS related stuff in terms of drive times and things like that. So I think there will be more parity between the two. So if you're talking specifically scorecards, it's kind of a similar trajectory to where we're going. But I would say like all of the other stuff that exists doesn't exist in a plus, right? So they have a nice scorecard, but the hubs and all of that stuff is totally our domain and not something that they can really replicate. And I think where you'll really start to see a big gap between the two, and where applause is an awesome tool for NPS scores and getting customer interaction after your techs deliver service and with the tipping functionality and all that stuff is super cool. But from an analytics perspective, I think where you'll start to see a gap is when we start to get into a lot of the predictive metrics and our ability to sort of highlight customers that may be likely to churn, things like that. There's going to start to be big gaps. So if you're talking purely from a tech scorecard perspective, certainly they're competitive there. If you're thinking overall holistically of the solution, that's really one very small part of the Wavelytics offering.
Great, thank you. Another question is, for this tool, do I need a data team? Do they need to have somebody that knows SQL on staff to utilize this?
This is definitely not something that you need technical skills for. Um, this is designed to be out of the box, able to be used without kind of any technical knowledge. Our other product offering, the Data Factory, is a tool that, if you've attended past webinars or anything like that, that's that's a tool that requires some technical knowledge and SQL to be able to utilize. But this is as long as you know how to operate a web UI and click filters and kind of navigate just typically on a screen, then you're in good shape there.
Great. And lastly, there's a couple of questions that come in about, you know, pricing and whatnot. So I would encourage you to reach out to your sales rep. But Alan, could you just go over the pricing sort of structure or the methodology?
Yeah. So the pricing is going to be per user. So it's the direction that I think RealGreen is moving. So it's going to be a combination of your back office and your mobile users, and however many users you have, there will be a price per user, and that's where we'll land. So as Danielle said, definitely talk to your sales reps. They have that info, and they can help you get sort of to where that land. And there is not going to be sort of a notion of well, this user doesn't need it, that kind of thing. It's just purely going to be how many users do you have, multiply that by the per user price, and that's where how we're going to arrive at the cost.
Yeah, definitely scan that QR code and we'll have your rep reach out for you. But I think that's all we have today. Thank you all so much for joining this webinar. As a reminder, this is being recorded and we'll share it in the upcoming days. And Alan and I's contact information is here if you want to reach out. Any further questions? Thank you again for such a great session. Really a lot of engagement. Thank you so much.